Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Murph, and in today's video, we're going to be covering a plus 14 Priory of the Sacred Flame key that I ran last night over my Twitch stream with some people who were hanging out with us. If you guys want to possibly be part of future videos or just to come hang out, interact with me, be a part of the community, and hang out with all the amazing people who have been supporting over on Twitch, I'm going to leave a link to my channel down in the description below. I would love to have you guys over there, but with that said, let's get into the video. All right, so at the start of Priory of the Sacred Flame, I highly recommend that if you're doing a key above level 10, 11, 12, that you guys discuss the route before you put the key in, because this season you actually have the option of going left up the stairs or right up the stairs to fight a different mini boss depending on which way you go, and that's going to alter what mini boss you fight with the first boss. So it's really up to your tank and what they're feeling. If you go left up the stairs after the first area and kill that mini boss, the first fight is going to be harder on your tank. There's going to be some nasty overlaps. There's going to be Pierce Armor and Judgment going out on your tank. And if they're not ready for that, if they don't have a defensive ready, or they're just not, prepared, they can get basically one shot. So if you go left, your tank needs to be very aware that during the first boss, they're going to be getting clobbered. If you opt to go right up the stairs, it is a little bit easier on the tank during the first boss fight, but you need your group to be on top of kicks, because you're going to be fighting a mini boss that spams fireballs, and they hurt a lot, especially on top of the earth-shattering spear that the boss is going to be throwing out. And you need to also make sure you have someone kicking the actual boss's battle cry ability itself. So again, going left means that your tank is going to be in a lot more danger during the first boss fight, but going right means that your group overall is going to be in a lot more danger if you're not staying on top of your kicks. So at the very start of the key, this is going to be a very standard pull that you're going to see in most routes, where you're going to pull this first pack, you're going to run forward and pull a knight pack, and then another pack of sharpshooters up ahead, and then you're going to pull them into the mini boss. I highly recommend that you guys focused down this knight. The knight is going to use an impale ability, which is going to do some upfront damage, but leave a pretty nasty dot behind. And it's also going to do a disrupting shout, which is going to do AoE damage to everybody, and it will kick you if you're in the middle of a cast. So this knight is #1 prio during this pull, so make sure that this is your main target while you're cleaving on everything else. Outside of that, the mini boss is going to do a thunderclap AoE ability, does a lot of damage. It's also going to slow you, so if you are in any danger, you need to make sure you're using defensives during this fight. Use Ice Cold, Greater Invis, Alter Time, anything that you can to keep yourself alive. Drop down your mirror images so that you're not accidentally getting any aggro. The sharpshooters are just going to be kind of pot-shotting random players, but they're also going to leap out near where a player is standing, and they're going to drop these traps on the ground. So as a ranged player, you want to be really close into this pull, so when the sharpshooters jump out, they're not jumping 20, 30 yards away, so that they're within range to get cleaved down. And then lastly, the footmen in this fight, they're going to do a defend cast, but they don't start casting defend until they get below 50% HP. So that's something to keep in mind. And when they do cast defend, you just want to make sure that you have some sort of AoE CC to disrupt them, to stop them, because any mob standing in a defend is going to be taking less damage. So, Supernova, Blast Wave, any sort of AoE stun, disrupt, knock back, anything like that is going to cancel their defend cast. But as you can see there, the thunderclap hit us extremely hard. I used alter time there, so we were able to just shoot back up to full health. But again, the disrupting shout and the thunderclap are the two main things that you need to look out for here on this first pull. All right, and so next up, you can pull this area in a couple of different ways. After you kill the first mini boss, the second mini boss is going to become active, and she's going to run down the left or the right stairs, depending on where your group is situated and where you killed the first mini boss. So as you'll see, Chainmail is running in now, so we have the mini boss in with this pull. We grabbed a footman pack at the top of the stairs, as well as a caster pack that was just to the left of the bottom of these stairs to pull it in, because Chainmail, she's not super dangerous. She has an ability where she's going to leap out to a player, and she's going to do an AoE, and if you get hit by it, it will put a pretty nasty bleed on you. But you're pretty safe to be able to pull extra mobs in to this pull. If you do pull the priest mobs in, just make sure that you're kicking the heal, because their greater heal ability will heal mobs for a crazy amount of health, so you need to make sure that that's not going through. One thing that you can do when fighting Chainmail, if you are lucky and she leaps you, you can blink right at the last second, or if you're already moving when she leaps at you, you can actually avoid the hit when she jumps at you, the lunging strike. But again, it's kind of hard to really tell who she's going to be leaping at. But if you're already moving and she happens to jump at you, there's a high chance that her AoE can miss and it won't hit anybody. But that said, since it is an AoE ability, you want to make sure that you're not stacking super tightly on your entire group, because she can leap out and hit multiple people with that ability and put that bleed on everybody, and then your healer is going to be struggling. But as you can see here, we killed all the footmen and all the just regular mobs from the initial pull. So we're chaining the mini boss into this extra pull over here. These pulls in Priory of the Sacred Flame, you need to be on top of kicks. The priests do a holy smite and a heal. You want to prioritize kicking the heal every single time. But you also have these conjurer mobs that are going to be casting fireballs that hurt really, really badly. And they can combo people, especially if they get hit by a lunging strike at the same time. So you definitely want to make sure that you're kicking as many fireballs as you possibly can. Obviously, you know, use things like Supernova and Blast Wave to disrupt the enemies. And if your group has AoE stuns, disrupts, you know, you want to prevent as many casts as possible from going through on these pulls here. So once you finish up this pull, again, like I was saying earlier, you have the option to go up these stairs to the left or up the other stairs to the right. Our group opted to go up the stairs to the left. This was the route from last season, so I feel like most people who played last season are probably pretty familiar with going this way. So again, it's totally up to your group. Just keep in mind that when you go this way, the first boss fight is going to be a little bit harder on your tank. They are going to be getting hit way harder, and you also need your healer to be able to dispel the judgment ability that's going to go out on your tank, causing him to take more damage. So again, keep in mind, going left, going to be harder on the tank. Going right, it's going to be more coordination required from your group. But when you come up here to the left, obviously you want to make sure that you aren't accidentally pulling the Lynx pack or the sharpshooters. You want to try and sneak through there if your group isn't going to be pulling them. And as you guys can see here, we chained a caster pack in with this knight pack. It's kind of the same deal as the first pull of the dungeon, except there's going to be casters this time that you want to be trying to kick and disrupt. But try and prioritize getting the knight down. The knight is the most deadly mob. Again, they have an impale, which is a dot, and then they have this disrupting shout where you want to make sure that you're not casting during it. But pretty straightforward pull. As long as you guys aren't walking into the traps on the ground and you're staying on top of kicks, this pull really isn't too bad. One thing to make note of about these footmen that I mentioned earlier is that they are going to start casting defend once they reach below 50% HP. So as you guys can see on their health bars, I actually have a little sliver right down the middle, which is indicating 50% health. And once they get below that threshold, that's when they're going to start casting defend. So that's how I know when I'm going to need to start using things like Supernova and Blast Wave to interrupt the defend casts. So just something to keep in mind. Again, you want to do whatever you can to stop as many defends as possible, because they're going to be reducing the damage that any enemy standing inside of it is going to be taking, which will just prolong pulls, you know, and you obviously are on a timer. You want to go as fast as possible. So do whatever you can to stop defend casts. But we're going to pull some of these footmen into the mini boss. Unfortunately, I don't have my cooldowns up for this pull, but we're still able to do some pretty good damage. Just one thing that I've always really liked about Frost is even when you don't have your cooldowns, you can still do some pretty good damage. And, you know, it's pretty sustained, right? It's a pretty flat damage profile. You're not going to get the crazy highs like Arcane or Fire when you're popping your cooldowns, but we can still do good damage when we don't have our cooldowns. And on this mini boss in particular, I would highly recommend that you guys be extra cautious of when you're casting Glacial Spike, because this mini boss is going to do a reflective shield ability where she's going to put a massive barrier on herself, and it will reflect, I believe, 70% of incoming damage. And Glacial Spike hits incredibly hard, especially when you're shattering it, and especially when you have your cooldowns going. You have Death Chill stacked up, you have your Water Elemental buffing your spell power. You can be hitting 12, 13 million plus Glacial Spikes, and when you reflect 70% of that damage, you run the risk of nuking yourself, and you can accidentally get yourself killed here on this pull. So again, just be very, very mindful of when you're casting Glacial Spike. If you do decide to Glacial Spike into a reflective shield here, I recommend that you have some sort of defensive going, or shield yourself, you know, Ice Cold, something like that to prevent some of that damage coming back at you. Or what I like to do here, especially when I don't have my cooldowns going, is I just like to save my Glacials for after reflective shield. And I just use like my base damage, you know, procs. As you'll see here, I'm just going to cast some Frostfire bolts because I don't want to shoot a Glacial Spike into the reflective shield and run the risk of blowing myself up. So you guys are going to see I'm overcapping on icicles, and I'm just using my basic procs here because, again, I don't want to get myself killed here. But as you can see, the reflective barrier goes down nice and easy, and we move on into the next pull. So once you kill that mini boss, the final mini boss is going to be aggroed. This one is Dual Maul. He is a caster. He's just basically going to be casting fireballs, and he's going to do a Cinder Blast ability on the tank, which will, I believe, stun the tank or disorient the tank. So you need to make sure that gets kicked every time, but kick as many fireballs as you can. You can pull this guy into other packs like we're doing here. As you can see, we have a lot of casters, so your group just needs to be on top of it. Kick as many fireballs, kick the greater heal every single time if you can. Use, your disrupts, your supernova, your blast wave, but just do as much damage as possible. And once the other enemies start dying, you can chain this guy into another pack of enemies. So what you'll see here is, I believe we pull the next pack over here on the left, and we nuke them down with the mini boss. So the only other ability this guy's really going to do is this Ember Storm ability, where he's just going to summon a bunch of fire puddles that are going to basically follow you around for a couple seconds. So just stay moving. If you have instant cast spells, it's a great time to use them. Throw out a frozen orb, use your Fingers of Frost, everything like that during the Ember Storm. Just make sure you're not getting hit. But again, we chain this into another pull because the mini boss has so much health that by the time that we get the mini boss down, we're able to also cleave down an entire pack of enemies with him. And a lot of these packs by themselves really aren't that scary. Again, you just need to make sure that your group is staying on top of the kicks. And obviously, again, make sure you're not getting hit by the Ember Storm ability that the mini boss is going to be throwing out. And once this pack of enemies goes down, as you guys can see, we are moving on into the boss. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, this boss is going to change depending on which route your group decided to go. So since we went left, we're going to be fighting Emberlyn with the boss. Now, Emberlyn, she's going to do a big AoE, which is just going to radiate AoE damage to the group. And this can have a nasty overlap with one of the boss's abilities called the Earth-Shattering Spear, where when he throws it on the ground, it's going to leave a huge puddle on the ground. It's going to be an area denial, and it's going to start filling up the boss encounter. It does a lot of damage, and there are some overlaps where that can happen while the other mini-boss, Emberlyn's, is doing her AoE. So that's a really nasty overlap. But more importantly, what this boss does is Dalecry is going to use a Pierce Armor ability on the tank, which is going to just do a lot of damage, and I believe it leaves a damage taken increase or an armor reduction on your tank. On top of that, the mini boss Emberlyn's is going to be doing a Judgment ability on the tank, which hits really hard, and I believe it also is going to increase the damage that your tank is going to be taking, and it can be dispelled. Your healer can dispel that debuff from the Judgment off your tank. But there can be some nasty overlaps with Pierce Armor and Judgment happening very quick back to back, where if your tank isn't ready for it, if they don't have a defensive ready, they can just get one shot and they can die. I've seen a lot of tanks go left and do this pull and just get deleted. So if you do opt to go left, just again, make sure that your tank is ready for that and that they have defensives ready for every nasty overlap. If your group does decide to go the other direction, go right up the stairs, you're going to be fighting the caster mini boss that we just killed with this first boss. So he's going to be spam casting fireballs, and your group is going to need to be on top of kicks. You're going to need a kick order, and you're also going to need somebody to kick Dalecry, because every time after he leaps at somebody, he's going to be casting a battle cry ability. And if that goes off, I think it's like a 50% damage increase for him and the other mini boss, which 50% increased damage on this fight, people are going to die. So if you opt to go right, your group needs to be on top of kicks. Don't miss a single kick. Don't let a fireball go through. The fireballs do a crazy amount of damage. So again, that's just something to think about when you are planning out your route when you come into this dungeon. So this pull as a Frost Mage is actually a really fun fight because it's pretty easy for us to avoid, the abilities that the boss is throwing out. The Earth-Shattering Spear, we can just blink out of it. But I really like this fight as Frost because Frost historically has been really good at 2-target cleave fights with splitting ice. And on top of that, since we're using Death's Chill, anytime that we cast Frostfire Bolt, we're gaining 2 stacks of Death's Chill instead of just 1 because there's 2 targets. So we're able to really quickly stack up Death's Chill. As you guys can see, I'm already at 14 stacks. So we're going into this fight with a huge spell power bonus. So we're able to just crank out damage. One thing that you guys will also notice, if I go back just a little bit, is if the boss leaps at you with the Savage Maul ability, what you can do is you can use Greater Invis, and it will immediately cancel the Savage Maul. As you guys can see right there, I used Greater Invis the second he jumped at me, and it negates all the damage from the Savage Maul. So that ability, when he leaps on somebody, he's going to put a shield on himself, and you have to break through the shield to get him to stop casting and damaging whoever he leaps at. But as a mage, if you use Greater Invis, it will cancel his cast, so you won't take any damage. You'll still have to break through his shield, but at least you're not running the risk of dying. As you can see right there, the boss was casting Battle Cry. You need to make sure that you kick that every single time. If that ability goes through, it's basically GG. People are going to die, especially from the AoE that he throws down on the ground and the Pierce Armor on the tank. But this fight is all about just cleaving as much damage as you can. Look out for the Earth-Shattering Spear, which he's throwing out right now. It's going to leave a puddle on the ground, which is going to persist throughout pretty much the entire fight. So obviously you want your tank to kind of kite around to make sure you guys aren't getting too contained by these puddles on the ground. But Emberlyn's was just casting Holy Radiance. Again, it's just a massive AoE that she's going to be channeling on the whole group, but you need to be mindful because that AoE can overlap with this Earth Shattering Spear, and as you can see here, when Earth Shattering Spear goes out, group takes a lot of damage, so it can be a nasty overlap. If that does happen, make sure you have some sort of defensive ready. Right there, the boss did the Pierce ability on our tank, as well as the Judgment ability from the mini boss. That was the overlap I was mentioning, where if your tank isn't ready for that and they don't have a defensive ready, they can get globaled really, really fast. Right here, the boss jumped at me with the Savage Maul. So I didn't have Greater Invis up, but I immediately used Ice Cold because the higher key level you go, obviously things are going to be hitting harder. You can get killed really, really fast by that ability as a mage. We're really squishy. So you can alter time it. Obviously you can Greater Invis it, you can throw a barrier on yourself, but Ice Cold is a 70% damage reduction, so that's a great use of Ice Cold on this fight, is if you get leaped and you're not able to Greater Invis out of it. And as you can see here again, Savage Maul is going out on our Death Knight. It's doing a lot of damage. Need to break through the shield to get our Death Knight out of that ability, again, while we're dodging the puddles that are on the ground. One thing that I would recommend as well, and you'll see me do here as soon as this AoE is over, I'm going to blink forward, because what you want to do is position kind of close to the boss, because if you're the target of the leap, you don't want to be standing really far away, because the boss is going to leap all the way out at you, and your melee are going to have to run all the way out to come damage him to break you out of the Savage Leap. So you want to make sure that if you're the target of the Savage Mauling, that you're close to the melee so that they can just immediately swap over to the boss, or, you know, break you out by doing damage to the boss, cleaving the boss down. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that fight. Once the first boss goes down, we're going to go into one of the bigger and scarier pulls in the dungeon. So I highly recommend that you guys save your Bloodlust for this pull in particular. So we're going to be grabbing this first set of 4 mobs right in front of us, the Paladins and the Templars. We're going to be gathering all the non-elite mobs that are right behind them, and we're also going to be pulling one extra pack either to the left or the right. And what our group is going to opt to do is pull them out of the cathedral to where we're standing right now, so that we can LOS them out here and pop Bloodlust, pop all our cooldowns, and just AoE them down out here. As a mage, when you go into Priory of the Sacred Flame, you want to try and ensure that you have Spellsteal talented, because the Templars are going to do an Avenging Wrath ability that is about a 10-second long buff that gives them 30% increased damage, and we can Spellsteal it as a mage. So that's obviously really nice to help the tank out as well, so that the Templars aren't just doing increased damage to your tank. But when we have Bloodlust going, all our cooldowns going, and we steal Avenging Wrath, we're able to do some pretty crazy AoE damage. So I highly recommend that you have some sort of alert or nameplate icon that's going to show when the Templars have Avenging Wrath, so you know when you're going to want to spell steal it. So lastly, going into this pull, your tank is going to be running in and gathering everything, so they're going to be really vulnerable. They're going to run the risk of dying really, really fast. So if your healer has a external available, you know, think a pain suppression or an iron bark, something like that, you're going to want to pre-put that on your tank so that when they run in, they don't just die when they're trying to gather all these mobs, so they can safely make their way out. As you guys will see, our Demon Hunter, I believe, does get pain suppression, but he still gets really, really low. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind, is do whatever you can to help your tank out here while they're gathering, to ensure that they don't just get killed right away. So with our tank running in, as you'll see, he pops Metamorphosis. He's going to run in. He's going to grab 3 groups of enemies. He dropped really, really low. As you'll see, the priest throws pain suppression on him, but he's able to live and LOS these mobs around the corner. So we're going to pop Bloodlust. We're going to pop Icy Veins. As you'll see, I'm targeting the Templar so that I can just immediately spell steal it. So I have Avenging Wrath on me. We stacked up our Death Chill all the way to 15, and we're going to use our AoE combo with Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm. We're going to Cone of Cold reset. We're going to do it again. The Paladins are going to be spam casting Sacred Toll. Does a ton of unavoidable AoE damage. Anything that you can use here to help your healer out is going to go a really long way. So you want to try and use Ice Cold, Greater Invis, Prismatic Barrier, Ice Barrier, just whatever you can do to help your healer mitigate a lot of this incoming damage so that you aren't going to die. But as a mage, again, like I said, you want to try and stay on top of spell stealing, Avenging Wrath, so that you can have a damage buff rolling throughout a good portion of this fight. And again, it's also going to take some heat off your tank, because the Templars aren't going to be hitting them as hard. So just stay on top of spell stealing and doing as much AoE damage as possible. As you guys can see in the damage meters, we're doing over 20 mil AoE on this pull as a Frost Mage. We're beating a Frost, Death Knight, and a Balance Druid in AoE. So again, super important to try and spell steal the Avenging Wrath as many times as you can. So as we move on into the actual cathedral itself, we're going to have some more pulls with Conjurers and Priests. So just make sure you're staying on top of the kicks. Conjurers, you want to kick fireballs. Priests, you want to prioritize kicking the greater heal. But again, we have Templars in these pulls, so you can spell steal the Avenging Wrath here as well, just like we did in the previous pull. It's just free extra damage. And then once these mobs start getting low, you can actually chain some of these pulls together. There's going to be paladins in these pulls. So again, sacred tolls are going to be going out, unavoidable damage. So if you're low, you want to use a defensive, anything that you can use, health pot, whatever you can do to keep yourself alive. These pulls are some of the more, scary ones throughout the course of the dungeon just because of the amount of unavoidable damage. But if you're prepared for it, these pulls really aren't too bad. It's just if you're caught off guard or your healer is kind of falling behind on keeping everyone topped through the sacred tolls, you can have deaths occur at this point in the dungeon. But like we mentioned, just stay on top of disrupts, kicks, make sure your tank's kiting out of the consecrate, use defensives for sacred toll, and these trash packs shouldn't be too big of a deal. So going into the second boss, Braunpike, this guy is pretty straightforward. He's going to do the same sequence of spells in the exact same order every single time that he casts them. However, every other cast of these abilities, he's going to empower himself, which is basically going to buff his next sequence of spells. So the first spell he's going to do is called Hammer of Purity, which is going to target a couple of players and it's going to drop a circle under your feet. It's going to spawn some hammers after a couple seconds that are then going to spiral outwards from where they first dropped. So what you want to do for this is have your group stack up in melee on the tank so that you can bait these circles to spawn as close to each other as possible. And then once these hammers spawn, you're going to see us kite the boss to the other side of the room so that we're not constantly having to run around and avoid these hammers. The next ability he's going to do is Sacrificial Pyre, which you can see he's casting here on the left-hand side of my screen. This ability is going to summon this circle on the ground. It's going to last for about 30 seconds. And what you need to do is have players soak a stack of this Sacrificial Pyre. This is indicated by these golden orbs that are going to be on the edges of the circle. So the first cast of Sacrificial Pyre is going to be 3 soaks that you need to do. The second cast of Sacrificial Pyre is going to be 5 soaks that you need to do. It's going to alternate every single time you cast this. So what you need to do is have a player run into the circle and soak a stack to clear this. If the Sacrificial Pyre does not get fully absorbed, it's going to explode at the end of its duration and it is going to wipe your group. So what you can do with a Death Knight or a Paladin or anyone with an immunity, maybe a aspect of the turtle like a hunter, during the set of 5, you can have them use, a Death Knight can use AMS, Paladin can bubble, they can run in, they can deal with all of the soaks by themselves. What is going to happen when you run into the Sacrificial Pyre to soak a stack, you're going to get a dot on you that can stack up. It does a lot of damage. So ideally, as a DPSer, you don't want to get more than 1, maybe 2 if you have a really strong defensive stacks of this debuff from the Sacrificial Pyre. Your tank can soak multiple, but ideally, especially as a mage, you probably only want to maybe get 1 stack. But you need to make sure that you're soaking the Sacrificial Pyre every single time. As I mentioned, if it doesn't get soaked, it will eventually detonate and kill your entire group. The last ability he does is that Castigator's Shield right there that he's going to throw out on all the players that are close to him. And you can stack them close together as well to make it as easy as possible for the entire group to move out. As you'll see here, the boss just cast Vindictive Wrath. This means that his next sequence of those same spells are going to be buffed. So as you can see, Hammer of Purity is coming out again. We're going to blink out, kite the boss to the other side of the room so that we're not having to dodge the hammers. As you see here, Sacrificial Pyre is coming out. This time it has 5 charges. So ideally, what we would want to do here with this comp that we have is have our Death Knight use AMS, run in and soak all 5 of these stacks, which our Death Knight is going to do, but I think that he accidentally used AMS early, so he actually doesn't have it available for this 5 set, but he still does soak all 5. So what you guys are going to see, he's going to get 5 stacks of the dot, and he does eventually die because it is just a crazy amount of damage that's going out. But one thing that you also want to keep in mind, if you are going to be soaking the Sacrificial Pyre, every time that a stack is absorbed by a player, it's also going to radiate AoE damage to the entire group. And if your group isn't popped up or healthy and someone goes in and they soak all 5 of these stacks really, really quick, they can kill the entire group. So you need to be mindful of what your group's health percentage is at. But as you'll see here, the Death Knight throws down AMZ, but AMZ isn't going to prevent the dot from being applied to the Death Knight. And as you can see here, he gets 5 stacks. If he had used AMS, he wouldn't have gotten any stacks of this debuff, but like I mentioned, it's just too much damage. The dot hits super hard. Our Death Knight does end up going down here. But, if you're able to live through the Sacrificial Pyre, especially when it's a 5 stack, the boss is then going to go back to his just basic cast of these abilities where Sacrificial Pyre will only go out with 3 stacks. And then again, every other cast is going to be empowered. So ideally you want to be able to have someone who can really easily soak all 5 hits without stacking up a crazy dot. As you guys can see here, I actually opted to run in and to take one soak of the Sacrificial Pyre, and I have the dot on me, and it's doing a lot of damage. If I had gotten 2 stacks, if I didn't have Ice Cold going, if I didn't have Alter Time, Greater Invis ready, there's a high likelihood that that dot would just flat out kill me. So as you'll see here, another 5 set of Sacrificial Pyre is going out. I don't know if our Death Knight AMS is this one. I believe he does, but we'll see here in a second once the Castigator shields go out. It looks like he does have AMS going. So as you guys can see, our Death Knight soaked 2 or 3 stacks of the Sacrificial Pyre, didn't get a single dot on him, but he may have used AMS early. If you use AMS at the right time, you can get all 5 of those stacks by yourself as a Death Knight. So me and the Druid opted to run in and help out with the soaks because, again, you do not want the Sacrificial Pyre to explode. It will wipe your group. But like I mentioned, the boss is just going to do the exact same order of abilities every single time. He's going to drop the hammers. You want to run out of those after you stack them. He's going to use Sacrificial Pyre. He's going to summon it at some point in the room. And right after that, he's going to do Castigator Shield, which is going to throw out these big AoEs that are going to drop under every player's feet, which, again, you can stack to make it as easy as possible to move out of with your entire group moving at the same time. And it's just the same sequence of abilities every single time. And like I mentioned, every other cast of this sequence of spells is going to be empowered. As long as you're able to deal with the Sacrificial Pyres, this boss really isn't all that hard. There is a decent amount of damage going out for your healer to heal through, and the boss has a lot of health. But outside of that, pretty straightforward boss. Just make sure that you're handling the Sacrificial Pyres properly, and you should be all good. Okay, and moving on forward towards the final room of the dungeon. So this is another pull, just like at the start of the room that we were just in, where you're gonna have some casters that you're gonna want to kick. You have paladins who are gonna be doing consecration on the ground, so your tank's gonna need to be kiting them. They're also gonna do Sacred Toll, which is just unavoidable AoE damage. But again, we have Templars in this group, so as a mage, we can spell steal the wings to get a massive damage increase. So as you guys will see here, I'm spell stealing off the Avenging Wrath so that, you know, I have a 30% damage increase throughout the rest of this pull. There's going to be some Templars in the room that we're going up to as well. So as a mage, again, just be mindful of that. Have something that is going to show you, or an alert from DBM, bigwigs, that's going to be telling you when Avenging Wrath is going out, so you know when to spell steal it, because you don't want to be missing out on such a massive damage amp. Once you get to the top of these stairs, generally tanks pull this first pack and this pack on the right with the mage in. As a mage ourselves, or a ranged player, I always try and focus the mage initially, because if not everybody is LOSing, the mage will start casting fireballs or fireball volley. And since we have a ranged kick, I always try and make sure that I'm targeting the mage first to make sure that I can kick it if it starts casting, to force it to come into the group so we can cleave it down. But again, another pack with Templars, so just be on top of spell stealing Avenging Wrath. This is going to be a pretty straightforward area as long as your group isn't going too fast. I've had a lot of Priory keys fall apart in this last room because tanks, or just the group in general, opts to go way too quick when we don't need to, over pulls or accidentally pulls extra mobs, or it's just going too fast for our own good, and, you know, people end up dying and the key falls apart. But another thing in this area, the light spawn mobs here, they're going to do a purification cast on a single player, and it's just like a beam that they'll cast into you. It does a lot of damage. As a mage, if you get cast by purification, use some sort of defensive. The best defensive that I would recommend for it is Greater Invis, because if you get purification cast on you, you can immediately Greater Invis and it will just cancel the spell entirely. You'll take no damage. The mob won't recast it on anyone else. It just cancels it out completely. So again, if you have Greater Invis and you get purification cast on you, you want to use that. So right here, you're going to see that we chain pull the patrol into this pack. This pack with a Demon Hunter is pretty safe to do because we have Sigil of Silence. So as you can see there, our tank put down Sigil of Silence on the casters in the patrol to pull them into melee. And this is just your standard Frost Mage AoE pull. We have Icy Veins going, so we stacked up our Death Chill. We are blasting with keeping Frozen Orb on cooldown, Blizzard on cooldown. We're using Comet Storm. We're going to be using Cone of Cold to reset all of those. We're going to be Comet Storming again, Frozen Orb, Blizzard on cooldown. And from there, you know, building up Icicles through casting Frostfire Bolts, using our Fingers of Frost, shooting out Brain Freezes. When we're at 5 Icicles, we're going to be shooting off Glacial Spikes when we don't have any of our other AoE abilities ready to go. And as you guys can see, we're doing some pretty respectable damage here. I don't think there were any Templars in that pack, so we weren't able to steal any Avenging Wraths. But as you guys can see, if you're doing the AoE properly as a Frost Mage, you can do a lot of damage. And it's just a matter of getting the sequencing right for your spells, making sure that your Cone of Cold isn't missing, make sure you're close enough so that you guarantee you get that reset, and just do as much damage as you possibly can on these pulls. These light spawns, again, when they get down to 25% health, they're going to do burst of light. It will do a ton of damage if you're standing in it, but if any enemies are also within that circle, it's going to heal them for a ton of their HP. So just make sure when the light spawns are getting low that as a tank, you know, you want the mobs to be pulled out to make sure they're not getting healed. So this fight here, a lot of groups, pretty much most groups that I'm in high level keys, opt to use our last bloodlust here on this mini boss. So this is the most dangerous mini boss in the entire dungeon. It's got 2 priest mobs with him, so just make sure that they're not healing him. Their greater heal is going to be healing a ton of his HP, so just make sure that doesn't go through. What you can also do is chain pull one of the packs that are at the bottom of the stairs right before the final boss into this pull, which you guys are going to see once these priests die. Our tank is going to fly off and pull an extra pack because we have all our cooldowns going. We have bloodlust going. We want to be getting as much value out of that as possible. Just use defensives during this pull, help the healer out, use prismatic barrier, use your ice barrier, use greater invis, anything if you're getting low to make this pull easier. And as these mobs start dying, we're also going to chain pull the pack on the left-hand side of these stairs. You do need to kill both of these packs, or else when you pull the boss, the packs are going to run up and jump you when you're pulling the final boss. So you need to make sure that you are fighting both of these packs before you go into the boss. What you can do as well, and what I'm pretty sure we did here, is once the mini boss is dead, obviously, you know, we can chain into the next pull here. And I believe that once these mobs got a little bit lower, we pull them into the boss, because as long as the priests aren't healing and, you know, you're not letting a bunch of casts go off, you're pretty safely able to fight these mobs with the boss. One thing to keep in mind though is these footmen here at the very end of the dungeon, when they die, they're going to do like a little AoE explosion, which does a bit of damage. And so if you have a bunch of these footmen mobs all dying at the exact same time, it can be a lot of damage going out and your healer might not be ready for it. So just keep in mind, again, when the footmen die, they're going to explode in a little bit of AoE to the entire group. So that's just an added little bit of damage that's going to be going out during this final boss fight. So Prioress Merprey, she is, again, a pretty straightforward boss. She just has a couple of main abilities that she's going to be doing throughout the first phase of this fight. Most importantly, Blinding Light. It's an ability where when the cast completes, if your character is physically looking at the boss, you're going to get disoriented for like 4 or 5 seconds. Your healer can dispel it off of you, but ideally you never want to get hit by that. It does a lot of damage too. So as you'll see here, Blinding Light is going out at the very last second. We're going to turn our character away so that we don't get disoriented, and then we'll go back to doing damage. You can alter time that as a mage, so you can negate the damage and immediately reposition yourself to be looking at the boss again. The boss is going to do a AoE ground puddle that you need to make sure that you're not standing in. It will most likely one-shot you. And the boss is also going to target somebody with a beam that's going to be chasing you around the room and leaving behind fire on the ground. As you guys can see, there are pools of fire on the ground. This is the path that the beam was chasing a player. So just make sure if you have the beam on you that you're not standing still, that you're moving around, and try not to run it through your teammates so that they don't take a bunch of extra damage. On top of that, the boss is going to just do a cast where she's going to radiate some AoE damage for a couple of seconds. So if anyone in your group is low, you know, or if you're in danger, just make sure that you're using defensives, prismatic barrier, anything to help out. So once the boss hits 50% health, she's going to jump upstairs and she's going to put a massive barrier on herself. You need to break through the shield and interrupt her to get her out of this phase. Another thing that's going to happen is she's going to summon all of these ads that are going to chase you up these stairs. And these ads, they don't have a lot of health. They're non-elite, but they hit incredibly hard and your tank can't pick them up. They don't have an aggro table. They're just going to kind of run around and just melee people in your group. And if you are unfortunate enough to get hit by a couple of these at the same time, you can just die instantly. So as a frost mage, what I like to do is try and throw down a blizzard down to the bottom of the stairs, or a frozen orb, or an ice nova to kind of root them and slow them down, because these mobs have a debuff on them where they're just going to slowly lose health over time by themselves without you having to swap over to them and kill them. So if you're able to slow them and delay them from getting up to your group, you're gonna be way safer doing this boss fight. You're not gonna have to be running around as much, dodging ads as much, because the ads, again, they're gonna be losing health by themselves. And so the slower they are to get to you, the less danger you're in. So as you'll see here, I threw a blizzard down at the bottom of the stairs. We also put a sigil of chains down. One thing that you can do is also, you know, Frost Nova, like I did right there, just to kind of root them. Throw out your Frozen Orb, your Blizzard, just to make sure that they're slow. But these mobs are going to just be chasing you. So as a ranged player, you want to make sure you're standing in the far back where we're currently standing, as far away from those ads as possible, especially if you don't have a bunch of slows in your group. As you'll see here, I throw down another blizzard to kind of root these guys. They're getting really close to us, but again, they lose a bunch of health over time naturally. So just make sure you're not in their melee range. There's a nasty overlap right here. I'm pretty sure I get disoriented because I was a little bit distracted by my stream, I'm not gonna lie. But the boss can target you with the beam that's going to chase you around and do blinding light at the same time. When that happens, you just need to make sure that you're running the beam away while also looking away from the boss so that you're not getting disoriented. If you get disoriented with the beam chasing you, you can very easily die to the beam. But this boss is going to do basically the exact same thing that she was doing in P1. And, you know, just make sure you're kiting the beam away, turning away for blinding light, dodging the AoE puddles on the ground, and using any sort of defensive to help your healer keep the group alive. This boss is pretty straightforward as long as no one dies during the intermission, especially to the ads, like I was saying, running up the stairs and chasing you around. This fight really is not too bad. You can kick the holy smites and all that, and just do as much damage as possible to round this key out. And as you guys can see, rounding this dungeon out, we had about 2.5 minutes left. So we made some really, really good pace in this dungeon. Our damage overall was really, really solid from everyone in the group. The tanking was great. The route was great. The heals are great. It was just a solid group all around. Very happy with this run. Honestly, Priory in a pug is probably one of the hardest dungeons to have a smooth run of because there's so many casts, there's so many things that can overlap that can get people killed. But if you have a solid group that's on top of the interrupts, the stuns, and you guys have a little bit of coordination before you start the key, you shouldn't have too much worries going into this dungeon. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two that you guys can bring into your Priory runs. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.